am here with the Coburg Public Library. I'm very happy to introduce Kelly S. Thompson and Selena Forsyth, who will be having an extraordinary conversation about Kelly's wonderful book, Girls Need Not Apply. And I am going to hand it over to Selena, who will begin the interview. And we really hope that you all enjoy this evening. Leave us a comment and let us know if you've read Kelly's book. And if you haven't, leave us a comment later and let us know what you think once you've read it. All right. Bye, ladies. Enjoy.
Thanks, Rachel.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Selena. How are you?
I'm well. And I know you're well because you look terrific.
Oh, thank you.
So first of all, congratulations on this amazing book. I simply could not put it down. I'm not surprised it was an instant bestseller and named one of the 100 best books of the year by the Globe and Mail.
Thank you.
But I must confess it gave me a lot of trouble when preparing this interview because there's so much to talk about. I mean, and I don't think that McClellan and Stewart would like this interview to go on for several days. And so it was difficult to try and figure out how to deal with this and where to start. Excuse me. So in the end, I decided to just start at the beginning and let you tell your story. So first, tell us about your family's 4 generations of military history.
Yeah, so my family has been in the military a really long time, although I was definitely convinced it would end with me. So 4 generations, both on my father's side of the family and my mom's side of the family. My grandpa, I just visited him last week. He's a 96-year-old World War II veteran. My grandfather was a Korean War veteran. My father was in Golan Heights in the 70s, not a nice time to be there. And World War II veterans on my dad's side as well. So it extends far back and far reaching. I just didn't think it would apply to me.
So at the beginning of the book, your dad is driving you to, well, let's go back a little bit. You were studying at York U, studying professional writing, because you wanted to be a writer when you grew up. How did you decide that you wanted to go into the military and indeed the Canadian Air Force, which was a first in your family?
Yes, so actually that's the other thing. The whole background in my family is all Army, except for my grandfather, the World War II veteran who was Navy. So I got a lot of ribbing in the family when that's what I chose. But I never thought I would join the military because it just wasn't what I wanted. I always wanted to be a writer quite seriously for as long as I could remember. And so when 9/11 happened, I was in my final year of university. And I was the last year in Ontario to do grade 13 or OAC at the time. So I was the last year before it was eliminated. So I was actually, other than doing one course, skipping grade 12 and graduating a year early because I was worried about getting into university with all the competition of people who would be getting out at the same time. So I had this very clear path. I was getting a degree in writing. That's what I wanted. And then 9/11 happened and I watched it from my classroom, my English classroom. And my dad was still in the military. And all of a sudden, I felt like a lot of the conversations that were happening around me didn't apply to me as much because their families were farmers and they were going to be staying in that area. My dad was military and all I could think of is, what's this going to mean for him? Oh, what about all the people and the repercussions of all the countries after this? And that's when I realized there was a part of me that wanted to serve something bigger than myself. Getting my education was, getting it paid for was awfully shiny, an opportunity. And it just felt like the thing to do at that time.
But the Canadian Air Force.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I don't know why in particular. I did have one man ask me if it's because I like the color blue. Not the reason. I don't know. When I looked at the posting opportunities that were available to Air Force, I felt like they were a little more in locations that I found a little more interesting to me. My dad encouraged me to go Air Force, hilariously enough, even though he made fun of me for it. I think I'm pretty realistic with myself about how rough and tumble I'm willing to get. And so the Air Force appealed to me a little bit more. Ironically, I never got to work with the Air Force.
Right. We'll get there. So your dad is driving you to your, at the beginning of the book, your dad is driving you to your first adventure, which is basic training, which is going to consist of 9 weeks of an IAP, an initial assessment program. The acronyms in your book are, there are lots of them. IAP was the first one I came across. So where was it and what was it like?
So basic training is done mostly for people who are going to university already, because our summers are only so long. It was broken up over 2 summers. So you do that period and the next period is the following summer. And it's in Saint-Jean, Quebec. So it was, I want to say about a 8-hour drive from where I lived in Borden with my parents. And so it was a big trip, and my dad drove alongside me to kind of keep me company. And it was, as I imagined it would be, to an extent. It was a lot of yelling. It was a lot of screaming. It was so physical. I just wanted to die on the daily, or at least roll in a ditch and hope to be lost or forgotten. And even though I was fit, I was not prepared for the physicality of it. But more so, I wasn't prepared for emotionally how it would affect me, I think.
So you had to be up at 5 a.m. for physical training, PT, and then breakfast, and then inspection. I mean, how did you deal with that?
I naturally have never been one who sleeps much. So for me, it was kind of like, this is the norm, although not when being so active all day, every day. But it's also part of the process, is a bit of a breaking you down. We are all sleep deprived. Then we would get into these classrooms and you're not allowed to fall asleep. You're not allowed to lean on your elbows. You're not allowed to even look like you're about to fall asleep. And so it was like this constant hyper awareness, and that was a real big part of the exhaustion. So I think for the most part, also it helped that I was 18. If I had to do it now, gosh, I think about people who were doing basic training when they were, you know, in their late 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s. Bless their hearts. Gosh, I could barely survive it at 18.
So how many women in your group?
So normally a platoon is 60 people. Our platoon was quite small. It was only 20. And then the following year, it was a full size. But traditionally, the military has, when I was in, it was 12% women. And when I released, I think we were up to 15%. So that number was pretty accurate.
So you were there for 9 weeks. What, give us an idea of your day.
Wake up, 5 a.m., go for a run, or some sort of other torturous physical activity for an hour. And then you would come back. You had a very short, limited period of time to get ready, get down to go, eat your meal, get back up for inspection. You would almost, it didn't matter what you did. Your room could be absolute, complete until to perfection. You were going to be screamed at anyways. And ironically, those are the things I had the hardest time with, because I was young and not confident, you know. And then classes all day long, classes on things about rank. We have to learn all of the rank structure. We have to understand how the military, how the support system works, learning about all the different chemical, biological warfare symbols and signs, really just a bigger picture understanding of how the military works, first aid, all that kind of stuff, weapons training. And that would go on all day, classes back to back. You usually got about 3 or 4 minutes to eat. So you would get your tray and eat as you walked to take it back. And I basically walked around constantly jangling, because I was a pocket full of coins that whenever we stopped for a break, I could eat a chocolate bar because weight was just falling off of me. And so it was just exhausting. And then in the evening, you were preparing for inspection, you were cleaning, you were polishing your boots, you were doing your laundry. No downtime, no time to just process or think. And I found that a challenge.
One of the things that we should have mentioned at the beginning was that you went into this as or you were going to eventually be a commissioned officer, as opposed to a non-com. So can you explain the difference between those two?
So in the Canadian Forces, the criteria for joining as an officer is you either have to have a degree or they're paying for you to get your degree. It's part of the process. You show a lot of aptitude for leadership, and then eventually you have to be bilingual. And those are sort of the main criteria. But some people, and those tend to be looking at things from a bigger picture, some planning, whereas when you join as a non-commissioned member, you're often in a trade. You're doing, perhaps you're working in logistics, or you're a mechanic, or you're a driver, or you're in the combat arms. Not that officers aren't also in the combat arms, but essentially there's often a joke that officers sit at a desk while the NCMs do a lot of the work. I never liked that attitude. So I would argue there's not much difference, especially these days. Most of the NCMs I knew also had degrees and full backgrounds. I think it depends on, at the end of the day, the job they would like to do.
Right. So back to basic training. There was a fitness test, which sadly you failed. You failed the fitness test. What happened?
Yeah. Well, I think push-ups happened. Push-up, it's funny, I can do more push-ups now out of the military than I ever could while I was in. I don't know why this is a thing, but I also think I got so anxious during these tests, I would be about ready to vomit. And out of our platoon of 20 people, 4 people had failed the test at the time.
Really?
Yeah, so I think, and it wasn't super onerous, really. A certain number of push-ups, a certain number of sit-ups, a hand grip test, and a bit of a running test. But men's style push-ups, like that full body push-up, goes against a woman's body where she carries her weight. Although I know plenty of women who do tons of push-ups. I'm not putting women down in any capacity, but my body doesn't like it, Selena. My body doesn't like it.
Mine was, never done one in my entire life, so I understand completely. So now, I read about the 7K ruck march. I was assuming that ruck stood for rucksack.
Yes.
It sounded like an incredible ordeal. What was involved with that?
So they build us up. The goal is, there's a test that happens in the Army called the BFT, the Battle Fitness Test. And it's often done before you deploy to sort of guarantee you're able to carry your own stuff, look after yourself, look after the people around you. It's a 13-kilometer march, I believe a 100-meter fireman carry of another soldier. And it's changed a little bit now. And then you also had to dig out like a shell scrape as sort of protection for yourself. Yeah. So this all had to happen, and I think it was 2 hours and 16 minutes or something. I can't remember all the details. The 13-kilometer ruck march carrying about 60 pounds of gear is the thing I mostly think about. So we were building up slowly to that. Building up, we would increase the weight, we would increase the distance, but something about them didn't go well for me. It turned out after a bunch of testing, it was cutting off. The straps just happened to sit on me in a way that cut off blood supply to my brain, and I kept fainting during them. I really wasn't the ideal soldier, we'll say, physically speaking.
So not only did you pass out, but you actually were sent to the hospital to have heart tests, right?
Yes. So try doing basic training as the girliest person on the planet who's already failed the fitness test and who then has to wear a heart monitor with 800 cords sprouting out. It was like there was no hope for me. I had to be funny or it was just going to do me in entirely, and do a lot of ironing for other people. So they would hate me.
Were you actually concerned about your heart?
Yes. Yes. Well, I was concerned about something because it was so, I would literally be in the middle of a sentence going, come on guys, let's, and then black out entirely. So it was really frightening. And of course, we're often in these positions where if I were to just black out, how dangerous it could have been. You know, if we're firing weapons, if we're on top of the obstacle course of some capacity or another. So I was glad to hear it was just a matter of where the strap hit, and it just blocked a blood supply in my neck.
But at this point in the book, you do actually suggest that you almost quit.
Yes.
How did you work through that?
Because I had never quit anything, I think is the only reason. And it's because I was brought up where you didn't quit anything. Now that I'm older, I realize there are times where you quit because your body is telling you something or your brain is telling you something. I don't regret not quitting. That's not to say that. But I had this moment. I called my dad on this night after this ruck march. And then we did a couple more ruck marches. And of course, I keep passing out. And you get labeled that person, you know. And so I keep passing out. I had to wear this heart monitor, which was endlessly horrible and kind of made me stood out further. And I called my dad, and my dad's like, well, do you want to quit? And he kind of finally said that to me. And I didn't really have an answer. I think it's so miserable while you're in it. And yet once I finished training, I would then look back and go, oh, look what that made me capable of.
Right.
And I think a part of me knew I would have the potential for that sort of hindsight.
Now, you had left Trevor behind, boyfriend.
Yes.
So have you made friends in your unit yet at this stage?
No. So at this point, we're in no unit. We're just in university, and we just go to training every summer.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
But had you made friends?
Oh, in training, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really felt like basic training was a place where people's poor behavior becomes extra clear, extra quick, and
Right.
their good side, their personalities are heightened by the intensity and stress of the experience. So you very quickly learn the people you feel like you would like to align yourself with, I think.
And one of those people was Joe.
Yeah.
Joe became a friend, and indeed at one point protected you from an assault. Tell us about
that. We had just had a woman who was sexually assaulted on our course, unfortunately. And it was dealt with very poorly, which I write about in the book. It was dealt with very poorly. And the way it was handled, not just administratively, but in what could have been a learning opportunity for a lot of us. Instead, a lot of us women were maligned for drinking when we would go to the mess. Excuse me. So we all went out that night. Another night, we all went out. We were trying to forget about it. And as I was walking up to my room, I noticed someone was following me. But it's funny how because we're in this collective experience, we feel so bonded with one another, even the people we don't really like. So for me, it almost didn't cross my mind that could be something I'd have to worry about there. Because they're your brothers, in a sense. And so I noticed I didn't even really notice myself until as I was about to open my door, and he was sort of in the shadows, this guy. And Joe and another friend came up and kind of said to this guy, what are you doing? What are you doing here? They had kind of noticed him leaving and following me. Who knows where that would have gone? But the fact that I needed that kind of support in the middle of basic training is something that makes me very sad.
Indeed, I'm sure it did. One of the people that I really disliked a lot in your basic training was, I'm not quite sure of his name, but Corporal Perceau.
Oh, yes.
Who and what was he?
He was hard on me. Why? Hard on me. They were all kind of hard on me, and they were honest that they would yell at me as I would run. This is all the course staff. Like, these are the people who are running the course for us. And they go, Thompson, you're eating too much bacon at the mess. That's why you can't keep up, which was becoming a joke because I was getting so skinny, it was disgusting. But I think they were hard on me because, in a sense, they felt I didn't belong there. And it gave me a sense that I didn't belong there. I was girly. I would get yelled at for having nail polish on my toes, which I didn't think was going to be a problem during a foot inspection, which you also don't think is a thing that's going to happen in your life. But I would get railed on for, why are your lips glossy? Well, they weren't purposely glossy. I used, like a sunscreen lip balm. Or why are you always giggling? Or because I was girly and that's my nature and those are my characteristics. And I got the feeling often they felt I didn't belong, and it made me feel like I didn't belong. But we all belong there.
Was Perceau a bully?
Yes. Yes. So there was a very interesting incident where someone from another platoon, a student, accused him of saying something inappropriate, I think. I can't quite recall what the accusation actually was. And he wanted me to write asked us, his platoon, his students who he's in charge of passing us or failing us, women in particular, to write a letter of support saying we didn't think he would ever behave that way. And I wrote that letter, and I'll never forgive myself. What do I know about what his behavior is outside of these very confined views of what they give me? I felt I stuck out because I was very feminine and I wasn't very good at the physical parts. I just wasn't. But I wanted to be recognized for the things I felt I did bring.
So speaking of the physical part, in my mind, which will stay forever, is the obstacle course.
Yes.
That you had to do, but even more so is the quote, bum clutch.
Yes.
What's about that?
So we were on the obstacle course and we all run it together. And of course, everyone wants to beat everyone else, but the goal is we're all going across the finish line as a group. And so there were a bunch of walls, walls that you have to hop over. And of course, you can't get over a 10-foot wall by yourself. So it was all about teamwork. You help each other, you lift each other up. And this guy was one of my platoon mates, and he grabbed my bum as he was pushing me up, and he kept kind of squeezing it, massaging it, and making all these crude comments. And it was the very first real distinct moment I had where I thought, is this what it's always going to be like? Is it always going to be about what I look like? That was a sad moment.
I was going to ask you if you thought that that was the first sign of things to come.
Yes, very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then weapons training, which I found fascinating. Was it daunting?
I liked it personally, in terms of, first we spend weeks with our weapon. We're familiarizing ourselves with it, understanding its power, understanding what actually firing that one day means. And so I found it very sobering for a lot of us. You have a bunch of 18-year-olds, you're very likely, and of course there's a peppering of other ages, but you're very likely to have a lot of young people acting like stupid idiots and pretending they're Rambo and getting excited. But there was something for all of us where we're like, wow, this is a really powerful thing, and that's a lot of trust that's being placed in us as soldiers. So I didn't find it particularly daunting because we spend a lot of time building up and familiarizing with it. We do a bunch of testing, like the safety testing and that kind of thing. And I felt comfortable with it. I was the fastest at stripping it. You like break it down into all its pieces, and then we would do it in the dark. It was the only way I was good.
And indeed, my friend, you got the second highest mark.
Yes.
Well done in the range test.
After having a joke about someone saying my boobs were getting in the way, and it was making my getting my target off, I showed them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well done. So next was the Farnham Field survival. Oh, I read that. I read that.
Still smell it. It has a smell, and I can still smell it, I swear.
Okay, what was it?
Sweat. Lots of sweat. Dirt, like dirt that's been coagulating on skin for a good, 2 weeks without a shower, which is often what the case was. And desperation. Definitely smelled of desperation. Yeah.
Well, what did you have to do to survive?
So it's basically like the super physical final intense week. The goal of the week is actually to test us on our leadership skills. That's what we're out in the field for. So you're given some sort of small task, like erect a rope bridge to protect this pretend civilian group from incoming war. And then you coordinate all the troops, and you're creating this road bridge. So it's about your ability to execute plans. It's about your ability to, think of the big picture and lead everyone through it and give them all the tools and answers that they need to do that job. It was also a place where I did extremely well. I also had one of the best marks in the platoon. And so I felt like I wanted that to be celebrated. I could lead well, and I could still do it being me, being who I am, which is super girly with a glossy lip. Thank you very much.
I have to say that your memory for detail in the book is incredible. I mean, you even remembered what was in your kit bag when you first arrived. Were you writing a journal?
Always.
Always.
Always. Since I was 10, I've always journaled. Genetically speaking, actually, I am apparently predisposed to having a very strong memory, but I feel that journaling really heightens that. It is the joke that I am the family elephant. Yeah. You want to know what you were wearing in 2001 on a Thursday? I've got it. I can tell you.
I'll remember that. I'll be calling you. Okay, so you graduated IAP.
Yes.
So it's goodbye until next year. Back to York U and professional writing. How was the year? And you were back with Trevor, right?
Yes. Yeah. Very much. I was in a writing degree. So those extremes, going from basic training to, I lived alone. I had my own apartment in Toronto. So then going from being constantly surrounded by the same group of people that you want to smother with a pillow by the end of 9 weeks. And then going to being alone all the time. And then going to these super artsy classes. It was a very big gap for me. But I fell into a real complacency to almost try to forget that I had to go back.
Into the military, you mean?
Back to the second round of basic training.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Now, so you were fit and slim at the end of your IAP. Now, 1 year later, you're back to your original weight and you're off to phase 2, which is 5 weeks of basic officer training.
Yes.
So what did that entail?
That was definitely getting a little bit more into the leadership side of things. It wasn't as physical. We were treated with a little bit more respect. That's a loose phrase, but we weren't treated like scourge the earth, and a little more free time. At this point, we're expected to understand how the military works. We're expected to understand rank structure and kind of the basics of things. So at that point, really a lot more academic stuff, classroom things, a lot more about planning, a lot more about just basic military knowledge.
Was it the same group of people as from part 1?
Rarely. I knew 2 people from my previous platoon, and this one was quite a bit bigger. So this was 60 people. And so, but Joe Shirrox was there and a couple other friends. So yeah, we were all back in the same platoon, which was nice.
Perfect. Now, it was there that you experienced your first real taste of sexism and harassment. Tell us about Ratman.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Rat. Mm-hmm. So we had our swim test, and it involves having to, oh no, this wasn't even the swim test. This was just, we were in the pool for the day, actually. And so he was a Navy guy who couldn't swim, which I found a bit of pleasure in. And we all go out, we're used to seeing each other. We've either been in fitness gear or in uniform for weeks, and then we get in the pool, and of course we're all in bathing suits, and we're all sort of nervous and self-conscious, but we're also just there to do the PT and get out of the pool. And he made all these kind of comments about my body, and oh, we didn't know that you had curves like that, and started calling me Mount Vesuvius. And that name stuck for the whole course. They call me Mount Vesuvius.
Yuck.
Yeah. And just to be made to feel like that was my value. And I think what had really disappointed me was I'm a great swimmer. So I was in the pool for the first time in physical fitness in the military, keeping up, doing everything. And I even got this congratulations from my core staff. Yeah, attaboy, Thompson. And I was like, oh God, I've never had this. I was so excited. And then that joy just went, yeah.
What a creep. Okay, so then came SHARP training, which stands for Standard for Harassment and Racism Prevention. And
Yes.
I remember you mentioned a video that you were shown through this course, a video of a man making untoward advances even after women said no. That struck a chord with you, did it not?
Yes. So we're watching this, you know, we're again a group of very young people, and we're watching this training, and you can tell it's one of those parts of the training that the course staff are kind of like, yeah, here, we're going to put this video on for you. It was the part that was a little, it's like they were rolling their eyes at it a little bit. And keep in mind, this is also 2005 or 2006. So it's a while ago, but they put this video on, and all the men are like, oh yeah, you know, cracking jokes about it, and oh, what's wrong with this, and oh, if you don't push, you'll never know. And all the women were silent watching it, because we've all lived it. We've all lived it 17 times already with the same guy sitting in the room making fun of it. So it's like constant little reminders. Yeah.
I can't even imagine how difficult that was. But meanwhile, another difficult thing, which I can't imagine, was that you actually witnessed, in a very strange way, a suicide.
Yes.
How did that affect you? And were there more?
Oh yes, undoubtedly more. So we were actually sitting in our room doing ironing, polishing our boots. There's like a common room that people could sit in, and the body just dropped. It was a man who unfortunately jumped off of the building and died and landed in front of us. And there was this weird moment of us all being sort of like, I think, wondering, is this going to be our future, where dead bodies become this thing that are more familiar than you ever want it to be familiar? I think that was at least what I thought, where I thought, is this where my life is going? And then there was this other part where so many of us went, how many of us have been pushed to a brink where we felt like we were about ready to snap? And what sadness, you know, what loss. It really created this tone for a while that everyone carries with them, a new respect, a new understanding for what that life can mean for some people.
And it also reminded you of your dad, because you remember times at home where your dad would get called out in the middle of the night because somebody in his division or whatever, I'm sorry, the terminology escapes me.
Yes, in his unit, yeah.
In his unit had committed suicide.
And I remember it happening several times. When you're the officer and you have troops who you're in charge of, it goes beyond that 9 to 5 that we have in a regular job. You care about them, at least I hope our officers care about them, but you care about them, and you are involved in so many parts of their lives that my dad would get called out. And my dad also suffered his own mental health problems with the military, which he allowed me to speak about. And so it's this reminder of what that life can do sometimes, and that mental health is a struggle that so many of us face. So
honestly, the part about your dad, or the parts about your dad in the book, is very powerful. So meanwhile, then to prove you were a leader, you spend a week in the Farnham Fields. Tell us about your assignment task.
Oh, so what? I'm sorry, Selena, it's even escaping me what I.
Oh, okay. Maybe a reminder is that you actually threw up. Okay, so I'll ask the question again. Okay, Rachel, you're okay with that? So to prove you are a leader, you spend a week in the Farnham Fields. Tell us about your assignment task.
So the one that sticks out the most for me was not actually my assignment. It was someone else's. It was a guy I really hated, you know, who was really smug and really full of himself and really hard on me because I was not like little Miss Fitness in his eyes. So we got to a point, and his task was to stake off this imaginary area that was supposed to be contaminated, quote unquote, with nuclear biological warfare. And when we hear that in the field, when it is 35 degrees and then also a humidex of a gazillion and a half. You hear that and all you can think of is, we're going to have to wear our gas masks. So we have to wear gas masks, gloves, the rain gear. It is now at this point 800 million degrees, and we have to go around staking out this area. And he decides he's going to make me carry this thumper, which you use to pound down posts into the ground. It's 40 pounds. I was 130 pounds. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to be the soldier who pulls her weight, but this is like pulling my weight. So I lumber along. I'm getting it going. But then I start getting a little delirious, and we can't drink water because we're wearing our gas masks. And I start getting a little wild. And I got serious heat stroke and vomited. and he failed because he didn't look after his troops. But he blamed me as though I had planned this barf all along just to fail him.
But meanwhile, after your own assignment, task, as it was called, you are left with terrible knee pain.
Yes.
To the point that Joe, our friend Joe, actually carried you out, and you very quietly, because it was not done, asked for a ride to the MIR, the medical inspection room.
Yes.
So what was the result when you got to the MIR? What did they say?
Well, and it was very swollen, really swollen. It looked like, I said it looked like I had swallowed a basketball. And I went in, and they're very dismissive when you're in pain because they're convinced you're trying to get out of something, especially me, where I was quite, often couldn't keep up with things. So he kind of gives it this little squeeze, and he says, yeah, you have tendinitis. And I said, are we sure? And the answer is, you either keep going or you say you can't do it and you fail the course. So my option was, okay, obviously I'm going to keep going. But it turned out my leg was broken. My tibia was broken, and I've had several surgeries since. And it's actually, that injury is what ended my career eventually, 8 years later, because physically it would not heal. But Joe was the person who recognized that I needed help, that I wasn't faking it. And he carried me for 3 kilometers while also carrying both of our rucksacks, which are 65 pounds at least.
Joe was my hero from that moment on, I have to tell you. Anyway, so you passed phase 2, yes. And I quote, the only injured chick who made it.
So I was told, yes.
That made me crazy, but anyway.
Yeah.
So then graduation, you're going back to school for another year. And after all that's happened to you throughout all of this, did you have any thoughts about leaving the military again?
No, at that point, the stress of what I would have owed kept me in, because I would have had to pay back all the schooling they paid for, all of my salary. Right. It would have been a hole I never could have climbed out of. And I was, at that point, it was like, oh, this is the hard part. Now I'm ready to do the job that I know I'll be good at, which was what I was training in, was human resources.
And then in April of 2006, you go to Kingston and to the Canadian Forces School of Military Intelligence to become eventually, a captain.
Yes.
So you are the youngest person in the unit. What was this training?
The logistics training.
Yeah.
So it takes place, ironically, it takes place in Borden, which is where I grew up, the military base in Borden. So I was there. It was very strange to then be there on a professional level, which in the military especially doesn't happen all the time. When you grow up in a military life, you never imagine, oh, I'm going to come back here and work. So it was about 6 months. It's broken down in a variety of different ways, Air Force specific, specializing in human resources, looking at all the administration stuff. I wanted to help people, and I specialized in casualty administration. So I worked with specifically looking at working with injured and ill soldiers, and especially because I felt like I would understand them because I was injured. I understood that part of things. And it was the time where I finally shone. I finally got to show, this is what I'm here for. I have empathy up the wahoo, and I am here to give it to other soldiers who I feel like are needing it and craving it. And I was good at it.
I'm sure you were. I have no doubt. So several years of training have gone by and you become a harassment officer. And you had had enough experience to know what that was all about. Did you
Yes.
think that you'd finally found your niche?
I had hoped I had found my niche. So this was just a specialty course that would give me a bit of a designation at my unit where I would support anyone who felt they had been harassed. And then to advise my workplace on what the next step should be. But it was pretty ironic to be a harassment advisor who can't stop their own harassment, because I felt very paralyzed because I wasn't someone who kept up physically. It was like I had to appeal to people in another way, which to me meant I will take whatever they're going to give me in terms of joking with me, flirting with me, making openly crude, horrendous comments at me, because then they'll like me.
Right.
Mm.
And then in Kingston, you become executive assistant to the commander, which took you to the Vancouver Olympics.
Yes.
And Joe was there.
Joe was there. We just keep following each other around. Joe was there. I ended up being there. We were there quite a few months, which I think people didn't realize, like leading up to the Olympics and afterwards, staying around behind. And it was my first time being somewhere on any kind of deployment. It was considered a deployment, and such a time of national pride in our country with the Olympics in our own country. It was exciting. Professionally, I was so miserable. It was absolutely impossible. I felt like a glorified coat holder, to be honest, and was treated as one.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But eventually you do become a captain, and you spent some more time in Vancouver, then back to Ontario,
Yep.
still with really bad knee problems and several surgeries. And this results in a medical release from the Canadian Air Force, as it was then called. The end of life in the military. Were you crushed?
I didn't think I would be, but I was. Oh, I was so badly. I moved out to Vancouver because I was then getting a job in publishing. And I thought, this is my chance. I'm going to do that thing I've always wanted to do. And, but I was also terrified. As much as the military provides a lot of instability, there's also a lot of stability that comes with a regular paycheck, with people who understand that shared experience. That's huge. And so, and I was moving across the country to start this new life. So it was really unnerving and very scary. And then that lack of feeling like I belonged to something plunged me into a very deep depression, for sure.
I'm sure it did.
Mm-hmm.
So at this stage of our chat, I'd like you to read a piece from your book.
Yes.
It's part of the conversation you had with your sister. Is it Megan?
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
At your graduation ceremony from the basic officer training course. Okay.
Yes. Do you think our Army dad will admit you belong to him tomorrow if you're wearing an Air Force uniform? Don't think you'll have a choice, I said. Name tags will kind of give our relationship away. Megan looked around my room, her bluish green eyes a perfect match to my own. She smelled of cheap body spray and fruity shampoo, and I smelled like deodorant, if that. I probably smelled like Army. I'm really proud of you, you know that, right? Megan fingered a corner of the blanket, looking impossibly small. I can't believe you actually did basic training. I didn't know how to tell her she should be ashamed. I was an MIR commando. I had openly admitted weakness. Hell, I'd been driven back to the bivouac. I wasn't worthy of admiration at all, and yet I couldn't stand to dispel the charade because I cherished the new way she looked at me. And I was, despite my IAP failures that now felt like a distant memory, feeling a bit proud of myself. It wasn't that bad, I said. I'd made some great friends. I tucked my civilian clothes from their hangers and stuffed them into my duffel. Kind of learned what I was capable of too, you know? And hey, maybe one day I'll actually help someone. On the other side of the experience, my previous reasoning for enrolling for a free education had disintegrated like paper reduced to ash. I realized that fighting to succeed in this job had highlighted how badly I needed the forces, and I hoped, somewhere in the world, how I was needed too. I wanted to be good at my job. I wanted to know it was possible for me to be a soldier, not a de facto version at the bottom of the pack. Megan smiled and passed my toiletry kit to be buried in the bag. Was it all worth it then? In the hallway, laughter reverberated as my platoon mates celebrated. I thought of the exhaustion, the workouts, the gas hut, the rappel tower, the obstacle course, the inspections, the food, and of course my throbbing, aching knee. I tried to forget the harassment, the assaults, the death, all of it present and future like a map of my career. And then I thought of pride and accomplishment, of personal strength and perseverance, of the glorious achievement in proving I could do it. I thought of Joe. Yes, I said, absolutely.
So, Kelly S. Thompson, all these years later, was it all worth it?
Absolutely. I think I wondered often, because now I have a physical disability. I can't squat, I can't run, my knee is damaged forever. I've been sucking my own bone marrow from my back these days to have injected into my knee, all these experimental things, trying to understand what's going on with my body. But more than ever, I now know to listen to my body. I know how much it's capable of and how badass it is. I know that I can still be myself and that that can be good. I don't know if I would have learned that as early.
Now, I know that you're writing another book. What is your subject this time?
So my next book is called Still I Cannot Save You. It's coming out with McClellan and Stewart, my same publisher, in 2022. And it's about my sister who was just written about in that book. We weren't close at the time. And she was an addict, and for many years that really damaged our relationship. And then she got cancer. So, and died, unfortunately, the year before my book came out. So it's about abuse, it's about addiction, it's about grief, but it's mostly about love, I think.
Kelly, Girls Need Not Apply is a ravishing book, and
Thank
you are an amazing writer.
Thank you.
From making me cry to making me laugh out loud.
I'm so glad.
I wish we could have talked about every single detail of your journey, but the readers will have to find that out for themselves, including where the title comes from.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. Your honesty in recording your experiences and those of other women in the military is something we all need to hear. You are to be congratulated.
Thank you, Selena.
Thank you both so much for doing this interview. I hope that everyone listening right now got just as much out of it as I did. It's amazing to not only read the book, which was fantastic, Kelly, but to get that insight, that behind the scenes insight into how you are feeling and what you're doing now. So thank you both so much for being here. Those were excellent questions, Selena. And yeah, we hope that if anyone's interested in the book, they head into the Coburg Public Library because we do have a copy. Or if they are interested in purchasing the book, to support your local bookstore and purchase it locally.